Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today for the September edition of the Insider series from Valenta. We are delighted that you were able to join us, and hopefully you've actually had the chance to join other Valenta Insider series. This is a webinar series, where we like to talk about topics that we believe and we've heard from our clients and our community are of real importance to them. We've had sessions in the past that are available on YouTube on topics like automation and using AI tools to transform your business, how process optimization can help a company improve. And today, I am delighted to welcome Paula McLean, Global Head of Marketing for Valenta BPO, who is going to talk to us about digital marketing. This is an area that we have gotten numerous inquiries and requests for more information about, because it is a very, very hot area at the moment. So I'll be introducing Paula, and we'll get started with some Q&A in just a moment, but just a few logistics. You'll notice in the chat box that you have at the bottom of your screen, that's an opportunity to ask questions. And at the end of our session today, we'll make sure that we answer the questions that you do ask. So please do ask your questions in the chat box. And as you can see, this session is being recorded and will be available on YouTube. And if you know anyone afterwards that you think, hey, this person probably would love to see or hear this, it's a great opportunity for them to see this after the fact. But obviously, we are delighted that you're joining us today. As for me, I'm Kishore Siva. I'm one of the managing directors for Valenta BPO here in the US. And as I mentioned, Paula has a deep background in the marketing space, and therefore we thought no one better to really talk about an area of marketing in particular that has been exceedingly of interest to companies across the spectrum of industries and sizes and around the world, and that's digital marketing. So Paula, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
So, thanks, Kishore. Very excited.
No, our pleasure. So, well, I'm going to start with just a very basic question. And when you think about digital marketing and marketing generally at a foundational level, how do you think about that? And how do you think about the three pillars of marketing?
Yeah, sure. So I think perhaps some people have even heard me talk about this in the past. So I'm really passionate about those three pillars. Absolutely critical to the foundation levels of a marketing program. So for every business, we talk about the three pillars being the foundations that you need to set to make sure that you're building a strong marketing program moving forward. So those three pillars, essentially you start with your website. So your website is that number one resource that your audience is going to visit. Your website is basically, it's the biggest entity of your digital space. What's really important with your website is it's gone from being, in the past, it was really just an online brochure, to now we're seeing a lot more interaction across websites, different tools that we can actually implement to engage our audiences. But really importantly, to something else that is extremely important for every single business today, doesn't matter which industry you're in or how big you are, is essentially your social proofing. So social proofing being that you've got your testimonials from your current client base on your website. You have case studies to show how your product or service is going to help people or how it's going to eliminate different pain points. So your website is your key resource that actually needs to be fundamentally part of that foundation level. So we're also talking about website, what's really important too is like that user experience, the content, the site speed, always talking about site speed. Google is qualifying our site speed. So, the data is showing us that, if your site is loading over that sort of 3-second mark, you've got a 33% increase in your bounce rate across your website. That, Kishore, is crazy because that could be 33% of people that, businesses aren't essentially reaching. So you can sort of see why website speed is such a big part of the website build itself. The next pillar that I want to talk about is actually social media. So, Kishore, we all know that, social media, it has become so big. A lot of businesses say, but Paula, it is social, I don't know why our business has to be doing social, but it's a really great way to connect with your audience on a very personable level. It's also a great way to give your brand that personality, which is really important in differentiating you potentially from your competitors. Now, once again, it doesn't matter whatever industry you're in, social media needs to form that foundation level. It is one of your 3 pillars. Biggest recommendation here for businesses is that you don't need to be on every single channel. If you're a B2B, LinkedIn is going to be one of your biggest channels. If you're B2C, then Facebook. You really need to analyze which channels you're going to focus on and then leverage those. Twitter's great for tech giants. We've seen some big tech giants really take Twitter and transform it from like a push method to actually being able to use it as almost like a way to alleviate pain points with their software and tools and, like that sort of feature. So I think, it's really important that businesses think about how they can actually leverage the different channels. And if they're not appropriate to your business, then that's fine. Select the channels that your audience is actually the ones they're engaging with. All makes sense. So the last pillar is messaging. So messaging really pulls everything together for every single business. So your key messaging, your tagline, it needs to speak to that unique selling proposition. So why would a client or why would a business come to your business compared to someone else's? What is that differentiation point? Is that really clear? Is it clear when they land on your website with that messaging? And this is where the 3rd pillar really ties into the first. So website messaging consistency, social media messaging consistency. Massive focus on this because we actually see it a lot with our clients where they don't know what their unique selling proposition is. So it's really, really a big part. And as part of the messaging, it's not even just the tagline, it's all the part of the whole brand positioning. Like, what's your call to action? Is it something that we can offer? Can we offer a free consultation? Can we do something that's, different to all of your competitors? Can we offer a cost estimate guarantee within a certain period of time? All these types of messages, are built to resonate with the audience and actually to drive a higher conversion, because that's essentially what we're trying to do with those 3 pillars. So they're sort of the 3 pillars, Kishore, that I talk about. And, fundamentally, they need to be right before you start advertising.
Paula, that's so important. And actually, it's, I think, really critical that companies think about talking with someone about these, right? If I think about speed, it's really actually only in the time since I've gotten to know you that I've fully appreciated how important that really is, right? And I think that's a really critical one. Social media, I think the trends around social media are changing so quickly that you have to be talking with experts to kind of understand what's the right strategy for you, and content and messaging that is always going to be evolving. So I think these are absolutely critical. When you think about the companies that you see in the marketplace, and you're dealing with companies literally in every country in the globe, including here in the US where I'm sitting, and in every other continent, including Europe and Asia, Africa, and South America, in addition to North America, where we are. What are you seeing in terms of the current state of how companies are doing from a marketing perspective, and maybe around those 3 pillars?
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, so it is a big cross section. We've worked with businesses where it's startup, where we're literally building that foundation level. And to be honest, like that's probably the easiest from our perspective, because we've got like a fresh base. And that's actually a really nice way to start a marketing program. Most of the businesses we work with are sort of, they're more established in their market. What I hear a lot of is we're doing the marketing and we know we're not doing it well, and we've been doing it for a long time, but it's time that we change. We get this a lot of probably more the medium-sized businesses. So they have administrators. They don't necessarily have marketing team even that are actually running their campaigns. So these administrators are literally having to learn day to day the different operational sides of marketing. They don't really understand the, pillars that we're talking about. So what I see is it's very ad hoc. There's not a lot of structure to it. There's no planning. It's really based on what they want to do every day. So that is probably more of what we see. And a lot of our clients coming to us saying that they need that structure. And really, when you pull an entire marketing program together rather than an ad hoc program, you're, of course, going to see a higher return on investment and better results than what you were doing in the past.
That makes perfect sense. One of the most important aspects when I think about digital marketing is the impact it has on helping a company to generate leads. And when we think about lead generation, this is an area that's top of mind for so many businesses because this is the engine that really fuels a lot of their revenue going forward. What channels do you feel provide the greatest opportunity when it comes to lead generation?
Yeah, definitely. And that's a really good question because, at the end of the day, why are you going to do marketing? You want that lead generation. And that's what the 3 pillars comes back to. It's about building that foundation for the lead generation. So to start with, I think EDMs are so undervalued. I think it's always going to be a balancing act. So an EDM being an email campaign. So emails to your current database, so undervalued. It's proven time and again that you're going to be able to convert clients who know you as opposed to someone who's a fresh client landing on your website. So first and foremost, work your current database. Create that credibility and authority with that social proof we were talking about, like the testimonials, the case studies. And you know what, Kishore, like every single business has this, right? But you just have to go and get it. So you just have to ask your clients or you just need to build it out. So email is definitely, I think, an underutilized tool and definitely the easiest audience to actually convert because they already know you. And then it really is very industry specific. So B2B, obviously, LinkedIn is one of the number one networks. So many different opportunities on LinkedIn too. So you can do your organic LinkedIn, which is absolutely critical as one of your foundation pillars. But then there's also opportunities to be using Sales Navigator to actually build your audience out further. Also LinkedIn advertising. So I know there's a lot of talk about LinkedIn being really expensive, which I find quite surprising because we've run a lot of successful LinkedIn campaigns that have had a really high return on investment. Click-through rates have been sitting around sort of 60%. And the actual cost per click has been sitting more around anywhere from 30 to 50 cents. So I don't see that as an expensive form of advertising. I know there's a lot of talk in the industry that LinkedIn's just too expensive. I think it depends which way you actually utilize LinkedIn. Are you using an email message, which is would be directly delivered to your mailbox, Kishore, like directly to you, actually with your name and potentially some personalized information, which that is extremely effective? Or are they talking about, we're talking expensive campaigns because maybe they're brand-based campaigns. And brand-based campaigns definitely have a place, but you're not necessarily going to have a huge amount of conversions or lead generation off that. So I think really important too, off your question, that, we need to be utilizing different channels, but think about how you're actually utilizing that channel. Because if it's an engagement campaign, you're not necessarily going to be converting people into a sale. Your audience is not going to convert. They're going to engage. It's going to be the bottom of the funnel. So just sort of think about the steps. So bottom of the funnel being they're just inquiring, and then top of the funnel is that sales. So really important. And then obviously Facebook is really good. Kishore, for like B2C, that's where most people are sort of going to be hanging out. And then there's a whole plethora of other channels like Instagram and so forth that, can also be leveraged for like lifestyle brands, which is really important. And then another big one that I will touch on, which is very good across so many different industries, Google Ads is huge. So, particularly for B2C, Google Ads is a space that you need to be investigating and potentially investing into. Audiences are actively searching, and that is very much a top of funnel advertising method for your lead generation, like you're talking about, Kishore. The reason I am such an advocate for Google Ads is because it is so transparent in the reporting. So Kishore, our clients love Google Ads because we deliver monthly reporting. I can say to them, you receive 23 phone calls and 17 form submissions of spending like $20 a day, which is not a lot.
Right.
So that's the sort of data, and that's got impact, right? So from a lead generation perspective, Google Ads is definitely, a big one that a lot of businesses should be looking at and should definitely be actively engaging with.
So, Paula, one very basic follow-up question. There's a term that for folks that are not marketers, they hear out there, and I think you can probably help them, the team, understand that. Search engine optimization. When we say Google Ads, that is a form of search engine optimization, correct?
No, it's not.
It's not. I'm glad I asked. I am glad I asked.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah.
And do you know what? I have clients who still are like, I don't understand the difference.
Okay.
Like, I'm really struggling, even when I show the screen. So essentially, when you type a search in Google Ads, you will see at the top of the page, there is a whole series of little adverts. They actually have a tiny little ad on the left-hand side. So they say ad. And then if you scroll down under that, the ones that don't say ad, that's your SEO. So really important that you're actually doing both.
Okay.
But from a channel perspective, Google Ads is a really easy way to get to the top of the page immediately. Yeah. Whereas our SEO is our organic program that you're talking about, and still really essential for lead generation. Because imagine if you could have a Google ad at the top of the page, and then your SEO that you've been optimizing for a keyword is also on that page. So you've essentially wiped out 2 positions from your competitors and secured more like online real estate, which is awesome. So there is a bit of a difference between the two.
I am glad I asked. Thank you.
That's a good question.
So, one of the things I would just add to what you said, because everything you said is just so critical. One mistake that I sometimes see companies make in this space is they have a head of marketing and then they have a chief revenue officer who sometimes aren't necessarily communicating. And the fact is that digital marketing is all about helping to drive revenue. So that strategy around the CRO strategy and the marketing team strategy have to be hand in glove and fully integrated for the company to really have success. Or otherwise, the strategies are going to trip over each other and the frontline team members are going to struggle with what they're supposed to do. I think it's, everything you just said is so critical. And I would just add, the CRO and whoever's leading the sales efforts must be fully working hand in hand with the head of marketing. Overall, when we think about, it's hard to believe we're in September already, but we're now starting to think about 2022, and a lot of companies are starting, or not, are well underway for their planning efforts for 22. What are some of the leading trends that you're seeing coming up in 22?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. COVID has definitely shifted how everyone's thinking about marketing, and also how businesses just engage in general with their audiences. So I think the spaces to watch is going to be the hybrid marketing approach. I actually think every business needs to be thinking about this. So hybrid being the different ways you have touch points with your clients. So is it in person or is it digital? Because we know that in a lot of countries, like I know USA, Kishore, you're starting to have in-person conferences again, which is really exciting. But what we saw during COVID was that there were a lot of event providers that actually did the virtual conferences really well. Mm-hmm. It actually opened the space up to a bigger audience too, because those that couldn't travel there anyway, or might have had timing issues or budget issues, it opened the space up. So I think, from that perspective, I think businesses need to think laterally next year and over the next, couple of months this year. What are your touch points with your clients? Because there are audiences where they were so happy to sit in their lounge rooms in their PJ pants with their corporate shirt on and, still engage in a conference. Like, that's awesome. Not even having to leave their house. So I think from a hybrid perspective, businesses need to give a lot of thought to how they're actually going to balance the audiences. Because obviously there's people, quite happy to operate digitally, but then there are those ones that want that, interpersonal sort of experience. So I think definitely hybrid is going to be something that we're going to see continuing for years to come, sort of from, the offset of COVID. Right. Off the back of that, the other big trend that is already really in play, but I think we'll see businesses need to be doing it better, is the omnichannel approach to marketing.
Mhm.
So omnichannel is using multiple channels and touch points once a client has actually engaged with your business. So it doesn't have to be just digital. It could actually be someone comes to an in-person conference. They scan a QR code to register their details at your stand, and they automatically go into your database. From that, they might you might send out an EDM to them as a welcome. They might then click on the website. Yeah. From that data, we can actually do Facebook remarketing, LinkedIn remarketing. There's a whole series of different ways that we can nurture them. You can actually structure the messaging differently. So your first message might be more of a sales approach. And once they haven't actually bought, you might put them into a nurture funnel. So I think omnichannel is going to be huge. We also have, I'm not sure if you've heard, Kishore, but there's a big Google update coming. Mm-hmm. So there's actually going to be, the third-party cookies. They're reviewing that right now. It was meant to be an update for next year, but they actually have announced that it's now going to be 2023. Okay. So it basically means, it doesn't mean that we're not going to have cookies to actually remarket for. What we're being told right now, and this could change, but what Google is sort of telling us is that we'd potentially still be able to remarket, but our audiences are not going to be as defined as what they are now. So, next question might be, what are the implications? Like, how are we going to do this? Focus on your first party contact, right. And that database I was talking about, so important. And secondly, the marketing message, the content, the imagery, it has to be spot on, now more than ever. With this update coming, companies need to be investing in their content and their digital assets, and really important to A/B test. So don't just set a campaign and forget, because that's something we see a lot of businesses do if they're doing it themselves. They're not optimizing. You should be constantly reviewing your messaging, your imagery. You might have a really high click-through rates. There might be lots of people clicking on ads or whatever you've got running. I challenge you to do it better, because there's always a better benchmark that you can set. So I think, next year, it's going to be a big year of change in the marketing industry.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. The, just a follow-up question on your point about, stay close to it and be willing to adjust, et cetera. How much time should you give a campaign once you get started? Because I think that balance is really, really hard sometimes to achieve, whether it's, making sure that you are being able to update as appropriate, but not making changes too quickly that you don't give a campaign or a strategy enough time to actually have the success that you need it to. How do you think about that, Paula?
Yeah, I think, it's really important to actually balance budgets as well, with that question. So it often does come down to what clients are comfortable with. Obviously, campaigns get to a point, if they're not performing, that, we would actually turn them off. I actually haven't been in that position very often, though. Reason being, we do tend to do a lot of A/B testing. Right. If something's not working, try something else. Try different creative, target a different audience. I think that's really important when you're considering, if you're going to switch a campaign off. But yeah, most of the time it sort of comes down to client. I think if you don't have like a Google ad campaign that's providing conversions within 3 months, like just as sort of general overview, you would turn it off. You would also, like LinkedIn would be similar, you sort of give it 3 months, you'd be very actively optimizing, creating new messaging, targeting different audiences. But like I said, I haven't seen that. We generally, you'll find a sweet spot. You just have to keep working those campaigns. And then the other part of that is, it all depends on competition in the market. When we were advertising during the election period, every single advertiser was getting smashed on our advertising budgets because we were competing with the president of the United States. Like, we can't compete with that. So you can sort of see, it depends on what's happening, the state of marketing at the time. massively going to impact on our budgets as well. And what does that mean? Like, how do you actually operate in a market like that? It means we need to choose channels that are less viewed, go back to your database and work that more. Keep your advertising going because you want to keep your data and analytics going, but your conversions, you may see a drop off during specific periods of time. So I think it's, really important to keep an eye on what's happening around you. And, your big competitors as well. What are they doing? Because is there channels or avenues that are untapped that they're not advertising in? And that's where we come in with our marketing. We always identify those opportunities time and again, where we can actually spend less money and get a higher return on investment because it just makes sense.
No, absolutely. So, one area that is absolutely near and dear for our company is automation and AI. And so when you think about marketing, how are you seeing automation influencing how marketing is executed?
Yeah, it's a big one. It's so funny because I think back to 20 years ago when I first started and we were not digital at all. We were doing billboard advertising and newspaper advertising. And to be honest, it was awful because you can't track conversions for sure. So
I remember
it was a bit of a point and shoot approach.
Yeah.
What is so great about the digital landscape right now is, it's the transparency, but the automation from a marketing perspective is just phenomenal. And I'm not just talking about helping us to actually optimize campaigns, which it does, because there's algorithms that, they feed the best campaigns for us and make sure our conversions are strong. Because essentially, where we're advertising, they want us to spend money. They want the businesses to do well. But I think, from the automation space, what is absolutely critical from a business perspective is that we're seeing, rapid adoption from businesses with like conversational AI. And what this is doing and the way it's impacting on marketing is it's been so great because it's always about the end user. So as much as we're putting all of this content together and these messages and we're trying to pull in, all of these different, pull the audiences in so that we can speak with them, at the end of the day, it's actually about their user experience. And why automation is so great is because things like conversational AI, it automates a process that now a business can actually, they can provide support to their clients 24/7 through bots. Like, that's pretty amazing. So I think it's totally revolutionizing the way we're doing it. The other example would be like Marketo or Pardot, I don't get any kickbacks from them, but they do it really well. You can do behavioral trigger-based marketing based on certain behaviors that users are actually taking on your website or other different areas. So automation is the way of the future, and it's really exciting because it will be amazing to see the way it actually evolves. If you told me 20 years ago we were going to be implementing conversational AI for clients, I think I definitely would have laughed. I would have thought that would be something my kids would maybe be doing. So it's a very exciting space, and it's something that every business actually needs to be adopting now because it's literally the bench line. Like, it's that benchmark. If you're not, implementing automation into your marketing, you're actually spending a lot of time on things that you shouldn't be. And why? Like, there's no reason for it. So it's quite exciting.
So I guess a related question, and one of the trends you see a little bit of noise about in the news over the last few years is with the advances in automation and advances in data. How should companies think about avoiding the creepiness factor, i.e., the fact that you may know a lot more about your clients than you ever did before as a company, and how do you kind of avoid that translating into marketing that the end client is going to feel really uncomfortable with?
Yeah, and I think, that actually feeds back into the Google update as well. Like, from a privacy perspective, they've recognized that people are getting creeped out. Like voice recognition technology too. Like, only just a few days ago, I was talking to someone about something on my phone. Next thing you know, I've got all these ads showing for what we were talking about. That's a little bit creepy, right? Like, so Big Brother is definitely listening, but that's, one of the reasons, obviously, that Google is doing their big update as well, which is probably, I think it's actually quite positive. It doesn't mean they're not going to be providing marketers with leverage. It's just that we're going to have to, engage differently with our audiences. But I think, it's always a balance. With the chatbots and the conversational AI, you can still integrate human interaction into that. I've seen chatbots like from some banks in Australia that are just like amazing. Just fascinating to watch and absolutely seamless. And they get to a point though, I think for me, for this one, I actually had a credit card that was lost and I ended up speaking to a human. But the bot process was absolutely seamless. So you can see, I think it's that balance. Businesses need to make sure they're balancing, their technology with their people. So the technology is not there, the automation's not there to replace the people. Right. It's there to enhance the experience. So I think businesses really need to keep their eye on that, because I know there is a lot of talk about this is going to like totally eliminate my job. People are getting stressed about that. It's actually not the idea of automation. The idea is that we can do it better. We can do it a lot better. And people can be very people focused and let bots do that mundane task orientated work that we don't need to do. So, yeah.
You're so right. I mean, one of the things I'm, with a number of the clients I've been talking to lately that are mid-sized firms that are growing, the use case for automation for them is in every case not about how many people am I going to eliminate. It's more about, I have a lot of really, really good people in my company that are doing work that is not a good use of their time. And that time is better spent with their clients and with their relationships. And so how do we help them spend their time on value-added activities? So what you're saying, actually, I think that's the one misconception about automation. I think that still exists out there, that it's about, let's see how many people we can get rid of with this. It's actually so much more than that, and actually has a much better use case. So I absolutely agree with that. So we're in budget season, right? People are probably looking at their 22 budgets and deciding how much am I going to invest in each type of business development activity. And so when you think about digital marketing with ultimately a specific budget that a company has where they have to decide where they're allocating, why should they be thinking about digital marketing versus perhaps some of the other potential business development options? And I'll say this from the premise of, it's not an all or nothing. Obviously, there is, it's an integrated strategy, but why is it critical to make sure they should be devoting some of those precious resources to digital marketing?
Yeah, and I think, that's a question that is asked a lot, probably more so from small businesses who haven't taken that leap of faith yet. I think the best way to look at it is you're not going to grow if you're actually not investing in your business. So if you can only tap into a market so much without marketing. So basically it would be about personal relationships and what you could do, which is very hands-on. So you wouldn't be using any automation in that circumstance. But with marketing, if you want to grow your business, if you want to increase your client base and you are pushing your revenue targets, you actually have to invest in marketing. And depending on industry, like I know mortgage broking, we generally say 7% of your actually loans written should be what you're investing in marketing. So there are some base levels that you can actually use to determine what their advertising or marketing budget should actually look like. But every single business needs to be reinvesting, because how are you going to grow? How are people going to know about you? And I definitely think it has to be a balance with other business units, because like you were saying, everything has to be integrated. Sales and marketing work hand in hand. And interestingly, what you were saying before, really important that the marketing team and the marketers have the support of, the senior leadership team in the business, because it's never going to work if they don't have that support.
Totally agree. And I remember a business owner once saying to me, and this was years ago, he said this, and it still stuck with me to this day, which is, my business never really grew to the next level until I stopped seeing marketing as a cost and instead saw it as an investment. And I think it is just really critical that marketing is viewed that way, because if it's purely viewed as an expense, it's going to be a very limiting approach to growing a business.
That's it. And it's more an investment, right, than an expense.
Absolutely. So we talked about a couple of these, but are there any other mistakes that you see companies making as they start to engage in digital marketing? The one, the strategic mistake of not integrating with sales is obviously a big one. We just talked about avoid the creepiness factor. But what are some other mistakes that you see in this space?
I think the big one is not doing the discovery when starting off on marketing and that ad hoc approach that I was talking about. So this is predominantly small and medium-sized businesses again. They tend to either run marketing campaigns for a few months and then not understand why they didn't get the conversions. And then taking it back a step, they've just randomly chosen marketing strategy, not on any data, not on any research or analytics, but just because they thought it was a good idea. And you really need to back up your decisions with all of that data. So when we actually engage with clients, we do a full month of discovery. So it's literally a really deep dive into Google Analytics. So everyone should have that tracking code on their website so that we can actually see who the audience is, what pages are they looking at, where are they bouncing from, what pages are the most viewed, because it gives you so much information about your audience and what they're actually interested in, what's resonating with them, what's not. SWOT analysis is really important. Investigation into the social media program. Where are the audiences hanging out? Where are they most likely to, when from a timing perspective, are they most likely to engage, even with your organic posts? Who's your ultimate persona or profile? What does that look like? Is it, a male in the USA who's aged 35 to 55, who's a corporate executive, who, is generally married? You can really drill down into what it looks like. So I think definitely one of the biggest pain points and problems I see with startup marketing is just the ad hoc approach, not really looking at it as a full holistic, approach to marketing. And actually, Kishore, one of the other big ones that, I think it ties into this is that doing one thing alone isn't going to exponentially increase your marketing.
Right.
Doing everything together is what's really going to start to build the business and the momentum. So I think that's really important, because a lot of small businesses do get in that trap where they might just be doing one thing.
Yeah.
Whereas, like I was talking earlier, with your really good question about SEO and Google Ads, imagine if you could be on page 1 for SEO and page 1 for Google Ads.
Yeah.
Automatically, you've moved away 2 competitors from that space. So, that is just one example of why, Google Ads and SEO work so well together. And then you'd have other strategy to actually build other lead generation channels. So really a multi-channel approach.
Excellent. So now I'd like to open it up to questions. I know we have one that's already been submitted. We had a couple that were submitted before the meeting that I would love to get to as well. And then I would ask if anyone has any other questions, please do ask it in the Q&A in the chat. So one of the submitted questions was, do different geographies need to think about digital marketing differently? So for instance, if I'm in New York, is my approach going to be different versus if I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, for instance, versus if I'm in Ontario, Canada?
Yeah, definitely. I think, yes, definitely. Different messaging resonates with different locations.
Yeah.
Obviously, the greater disparity between the locations, the greater difference in the messaging. And I think here, it really brings back to that A/B testing that we were talking about earlier, and A/B testing messaging and different content, and even just imagery for different locations, because we know that different states in the USA react differently to the messaging. And I know I'm based in Australia, and I'm in Brisbane, messaging for a Queenslander compared to someone in Victoria is also very different.
Right.
We're our own different beasts, I suppose. So the messaging across regions definitely needs to be tailored. And that also ties into that call to action as well. That's actually another really good area to test, is what actually resonates better with the audience from the call to action. Is it something free, or is it something else that you can offer that's actually going to be more appealing to that specific group? And that's where we come back to the analytics again that we were talking about with the discovery, because during that, you should be able to determine that maybe your audience sets are quite different across each state in the USA. And then we have to tailor programs across each state depending on what those differentiators are.
Yeah, I think that is so important, Paula. And I've seen it in prior lives too, where companies that have gone into new markets and made an assumption that I'm in a new market, I'm in a country that on a map doesn't look all that big. So on that basis, I'm just going to have one approach there, when in fact, it is a very, very big difference in terms of how clients in one part of that country react versus others. Same thing goes with states, even within states in the US, obviously, huge differences in how you market. If I use New York as an example, New York City versus Buffalo, New York as an example, right? So
huge.
I think, so I think very, very significant, important for clients and companies to think about that. Let's look at a question that we've gotten submitted from one of our participants today. So, omnichannel marketing is currently being used by multiple brands. Would you suggest multiple messaging across omnichannels would work better rather than the same communication across all touch points?
I think so. I think I'm understanding this. So I would make sure your messaging is consistent across all channels. That sort of comes back to that third pillar that we were talking about. So you want to make sure that you're always consistent with all of your messaging. What might be different though is depending on what they might have engaged with on your website. So to do a really simple sort of example, if someone has engaged, say it's a bedding company, they sell queen and king size beds.
Yeah.
Say they've engaged with content that they're looking at a queen size bed. All of the omni-channel approach would actually be developed so that you are talking about the queen size bed only and trying to push them back into that sales funnel. Once they don't actually engage quite quickly, then you would actually put them into a nurture campaign. So you'd be starting to talk about the quality of the product, the testimonials and case studies of people who have bought and loved the bed. But the messaging needs to definitely be consistent across the board.
Terrific. I'll ask if any other questions that anyone has, feel free to put into the chat box. Well, we wait. One more submitted question from earlier, which was, we talked about different geographies. How about different industries? Do they also have to think about digital marketing differently, depending on the industry that they're in?
Yeah, I think obviously messaging is going to be very different. Channels are going to be very different.
Yeah.
So industry specific marketing is definitely really important. And that's where it comes back to, sort of that discovery that I was talking about, because you really get to understand the competition and how to position a business within their specific industry and within their particular niche that they might be operating in. So industry specific, very, very important from the marketing approach.
Terrific. We have another question that was submitted. Are you concerned about the new Google ad changes in 2023?
I think from my perspective, I think we're all on a level playing field. Yeah. I know there has been a lot of negativity around the update from a marketing perspective. So not from that privacy perspective, because obviously from a privacy perspective, we're trying to avoid that creepiness that Kishore was talking about earlier. I'm not concerned because we're all in a level playing field. I actually think it's going to mean that marketers need to be smarter with their decisions, and businesses are going to have to be more strategic in their approach. I actually think that's a good thing, because I think it will actually ultimately improve the user experience with a brand and with a business. So whilst it is going to be a period of change, and there's going to be, as a marketer, we're going to have to adapt ourselves. But I am not concerned. I actually think it's positive change. And, keep in mind that we need to focus on those first contact points, like that email database, that you should be building. That's become even more critical now.
Terrific. All right, I think we're at time. So, Paula, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time and for all of your insights. Any final comments before we wrap up today?
No, I think just big one. If take something away, take away the 3 pillars. Really important to get that foundation level right. You can't be advertising or doing anything within your marketing program if you don't have your foundations right. So that's definitely, I think, the big takeaway today.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much to everyone that joined us for today and for the engagement and the questions. And Paula, thank you again for, as you mentioned, getting up very early in Australia to join us today.
Thank you for having me.
And we look forward to having this discussion again very soon. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.